lovely people, this is Dario from Living Soil Garden. Welcome back to the garden. This is going to be the tour of the garden in September, so we haven't seen each other in more than a month. There are quite a few bits of news before we get started with the tour, and one of which is kind of mixed for us. You know, we're obviously very excited, but we're also a little bit sad, and that is that we are going to leave the UK at the beginning of 2023, and this will be our last season at Living Soil Garden in Exeter. This doesn't mean that anything will change in the channel, YouTube channel, or our social media, apart from the fact that you'll be seeing a lot more content from our new site, which will be in Florence, in Italy. And over there we will set up a similar style, no dig, regenerative market garden, but we will incorporate it within an agroforestry syntropical successional system. So with fruit tree and other perennial crop production, crops will be not only vegetables and fruits, but there will be a lot of other things. But I won't dwell too long on that, apart from the fact that we're obviously very sad about leaving the UK. This is a country that has given us loads. I speak for myself in saying that I'm sure I will miss it enormously. This is a place that more than any other countries where I've lived has given me the sense of opportunity, it has given me a lot, and so I won't become sentimental, but I think we will miss this climate as well, because we will be facing a lot of challenges in hot Italy with a lot of droughts and problems like that. But we're up for a good challenge, and obviously this will mean we'll be closer to our families and we'll be able to engage with a completely new adventure, which is also great because we'll be able to share with you all that we do, and how we put things together, how we install systems from scratch. And there will always be an English-based social media outlet for all we do, so stay tuned if you are interested in following our journey. Now I'm going to get stuck in with the garden tour, and you'll be able to see quite a few things that hopefully will be interesting for you in the autumn and winter garden. Before I start to show you things bed by bed, another thing that I wanted to respond to is this. A lot of you have asked about whether we will have an online course, because there's a lot of information that we share in very many different forms, that is on social media, on Instagram, on Telegram, on YouTube, in written form in our blogs and things like that. And it would be nice to have a fully comprehensive, structured online course with video and written content. Now, I've been working at this for a long time, but it never really got going because I don't have the time. You know, as many of you know, I already worked at the university, and Flavia and I are, you know, busy in the garden trying to produce high quality food and education as well, full time, more than you can ever imagine, to be honest. And people who do this job know that there's rarely any time to do anything else, which is also a big stress. It puts a lot of pressure on our lives. Well, that's fine, because that's what we love doing, and we're getting better and better at it. Another thing I'm gonna say is a lot of people find that if we have the time to share all of this content, like, you know, I do these long videos, it must mean that we have a lot of time on our hands, but that's not the case. And I would love if you could appreciate the fact that this needs to be planned in. All the time that I spend in front of the camera is time that I'm not producing food or working for my other jobs, and that means that's time that money doesn't come in. But that's not an excuse not to do it. I think this is a huge duty that we have as food producers, to share as much as we can about what we do, because my personal feeling, and Flavia's as well, is that we should be empowering you with what we do. We're not interested in only putting food on people's plates. We are interested in producing high quality food, explaining how it is produced, and allowing the people who follow us to be able to do that themselves. And that's why I say we are biodegradable, if we do our job well, you'll need us less and less, and you'll be able to grow most of your food for yourself. And that's why I put a lot of emphasis on, let's call it education. That's I think too big a word, but on sharing what we do and how we do it. And so I haven't been able to finish answering the question that I asked myself. I haven't been able to do an online course, put it together, even though I could put together a few videos and edit them. I would like to do it well, and I can't do it on my own. So if you have any suggestions, if you know anybody who would like to be involved, we've got still a few months to go, so there's always time for a little bit of that, a little bit of work to be going into there. I have lots of video material, but it's just editing it and putting it together in a consistent form that requires too much time. But thanks for those of you who have asked, and I'm sure I'll, in the future down the line there will be a structured online course, whether we'll film it here or in Italy. I will make sure that it's relevant to the UK climate as well, because we know this climate very, very well, and so in fact this is where we've built all of our experience. And so you can be reassured that there will be wherever we'll be filming it, there will be a lot that will be relevant to the UK climate. But enough of me talking, let's get started with the tour. Here we go. So I'm going to start the tour from this side of the garden, which is one of the newest areas that we've created. By the way, I'm going to take the time to do this tour a little bit slower than the previous one. Well, I don't mean slower, I'll always be talking way too fast for most people, but I'm joking. But what I mean is I'm going to make it as long as it needs to be. So apologies to those of you who don't have the time or don't like watching videos that are too long. You can speed this up on YouTube if you want, but also bear in mind that we have a Telegram channel where we share a lot of content for free, and this is mostly in short format, maximum 5-minute long videos. Ooh, and you might have seen the goldfinches. It's just in the distance there. I'll be showing them to you again if I can. Ooh, there you go. So those goldfinches have arrived this year, and they've been feeding off the chicory stalks that are in the field. This is a herbal lane, that field next to us, and they love eating those seeds, and incidentally they love the willow as well. They perch on the willow at the end of this row, which I'll show you in a minute, and they've been eating some insects as well, and it's lovely to have them around all the time. They've attracted also a a kestrel that's been trying to hunt them, but without much success from what I can tell. Alright, so let's get going. This is a syntropic, well, syntropic is not the best word perhaps, but successional bed, high density bed. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because at the moment there's mostly just carrots and beetroots growing. We've been harvesting so many things from it, and now it's going into a stalling phase, which is fine. Everything is going to be slowing down, so there's no point doing heavy pruning. You can watch our May tour, and at the beginning of that tour I talk a lot about the concept behind this bed. There are essentially two types of crops: the ones that we cut very often, like the lettuce, the endive here, or endive, the spinach, and so on and so forth. And then there are long-term crops like the carrots, the beetroots, the beans, and things like that. But this bed has been producing masses of food, and I can show you the other two beds which are grown with the same concept. There's been a lot of broccoli and fennel. There's still a few fennels in there, and lots of edible flowers, beans, lettuce, endive, baby kale, and now there's some winter squash, which is a bush variety, so it doesn't trail too much. And then we have some parsley, lots of stuff. And over here we have more brassicas in the center, so those are more long term, but they also get pruned often. And then on the side we have some purslane, and then we had some sweet corn. Now there's been a bit of damage there. Those lumps actually don't come from this bed, they come from somewhere else, but we have to replant that area because we've harvested everything. And so you can see that these beds have been doing their thing, but now they're going into a restful mode. Allow me to use that word, I don't even know if it's an English word. I think I'll get stuck between languages very soon because I've been switching too often. So here we go. So we've got new beds, beds that have been planted recently with winter crops. And when I say winter crops, I don't like to use that type of expression because these are continuously cropping beds. So there's no real summer and then winter, or spring and then summer alternation. Things are constantly changing, and whenever we harvest something, we replace it with something else. So here we had a lot of lettuce, and we replaced it with some broccoli on the side and some fennel in the middle. So that allows us to switch to a different type of crop, so that if we had any root aphids from lettuce, which wasn't a huge problem this year, but if it was, we could have ensured that we don't plant lettuce on top of already infested roots from the previous crop. So here we've got parsley and kale. See, these beautiful guys here. Kale, red curly and curly parsley. Here we have Chinese leaf, and then on the side we have chicories alternated with fennel. Now this is a very late sowing of chicory. It might not amount to much, but it was an experiment. Here we've got some chard in the middle. Again, this is the very last sowing of chard, and we have some beetroot on the side. Here, this is a chard that was planted a lot earlier with some lettuce and endive on the side. Again, I'm going to pronounce this endive now, but I know some of you pronounce it endive, some of you pronounce it endive, so just bear with me. So endive, chard, lettuce, and this is the whole thing along the bed, and it's quite a nice, good looking bed. We've been harvesting the chard relatively heavily so that we allow for light to be abundant for the lettuces also on the northern side, which is this one. Right, so here we have fennel and cauliflowers, similar to what you saw earlier. This is a classic interplanting that we do, which is fennel and lettuce over the autumn. And this is something I mentioned in the Telegram group, where I did a video about this type of interplanting, but also about the fact that normally we would plant lettuces in 4 rows, so this would be a lot more dense. And normally we would plant fennels in 3 rows. I mean, if a bed was planted only with fennel, it would have 3 rows of fennel. And if a bed was planted only with lettuce, it would have 4 rows of lettuce. But because we're in the autumn and light becomes more scarce and fungal diseases become more common, like you can see here, for example, this plant isn't very happy, so we'll have to remove it and replace it. And therefore, we have to allow for more airflow and for more light in. So we're going to plant the lettuce in the density that's typical of fennel, which is a little bit lower than the one that's typical for lettuce, but that will allow our lettuce to have more space and light, and we're still not losing a lot of space. So we need to replace some of the lettuces that have been struggling. Depending on the varieties, it's difficult to find varieties that cope well with this transition between very hot to suddenly very wet and chilly weather. It's been quite chilly actually. At night we've had 4 or 5 degrees, which is quite significantly low compared to the averages in September. So we usually don't get frost. In the last few years we haven't had any frost until February, really, until January, and now we were very close to freezing in September already, so very strange. All right, so here we have another way of interplanting chard, and this will be, I guess, a common theme today, interplanting things for winter and autumn. We have mustard down the middle. It's already flowering, but that's fine. We can still get another harvest, and we'll harvest it for ourselves, and then we'll remove it. And this is the idea with this interplanting, if you have a look, that the chard will be very vigorous and will really shade anything out that could grow in the middle. Whenever we tried to grow radishes in between or carrots in between, they didn't do very well, because the chard is really a big crop with large leaves that tends to overwhelm most things. But because the mustard is very fast and it went to flower relatively quickly as we expected, we got 3, I think we got only 2 actually, 2 cuts from this mustard, and now we'll get perhaps a 3rd one with the flowers. We'll have to remove the flowering stems, and then by then the chard will close its canopy and there won't be any space for growing anything else in between. So that's what would happen in nature. In natural succession, you would have annual weeds or annual spontaneous plants, and then something else would come in, attracted either by the previous crop or brought in by an animal that was attracted by the previous crop, or by the wind or anything else. And so essentially this then will become bigger and bigger, higher and higher, and shade out the previous one, which has finished and fulfilled its ecological role and can disappear and become fertility for the following stage. So we're mimicking that natural process with cropping plants. Here we have the last perpetual spinach succession. Actually, we might do another one, but you see how slow these guys are? Normally they're so fast. In 2 weeks they will be looking already like this. But it's been 3, I think it's been 2 weeks actually, but they still don't look like anything like these. And these have been cut 3 times already. These have been cut also 3 times, and these guys have been cut only Actually these haven't been cut at all. These have been cut once. And so you see perpetual spinach gets cut and then grows back like that, usually in 2 weeks of the summer. But now it's, you know, it's much cooler. We have temperatures that never go above, I'm tempted to say 19, 18 degrees during the day. Now it must be chillier than that at the moment. And so essentially, even though there is still quite a bit of light, these will take much longer to recover from a cut. And this means that we have to be very good at planning for successions, especially for the cutting and the harvesting. Now, pardon my shadow there, but we have a bed of lettuce that's been just planted after beetroots, and this is a bed of chard that's been cropping throughout the year from March, and now I'm a bit unsure whether we should remove it. I think this one has been cleaned, so it's quite good, but the one at the back we might replace with something else, because as you've seen, we've already got a lot more successions of chard that have been just started to be harvested. So here we have some cavallonero. Again, that's been cropping for quite a long time, and you can see we harvest the lower leaves, and so we get more leaves at the top. The courgettes, despite having a really big attack of powdery mildew initially, we cured that with a little bit of a homemade spray that we make with local ingredients, and now they've kept doing well in cropping. Now they're getting again a little bit of mildew, but it's significant that we managed to let them survive and crop into September like this, considering that they were almost gone. And look at the beasts that they have become. You know, that plant goes all the way there, so it's at least 1.5 meters long, and it's cropping at its tip. Here we have another succession with, so under the net, incidentally, there are carrots. I'm not going to show you those. There were, well, I might actually go in there. There was some rocket before the carrots, and now, yeah, I can't lift this properly, so apologies, but there are essentially carrots, and there was some rocket before those, so there's a few seeds that have been germinating of rocket in there, which is quite nice, having rocket as a weed. Over here we have again chard with baby kale in the middle. Again, this chard, I don't think it's been harvested yet, but it will. And you can see that the compost we've used on this bed, I think I discussed this in the previous tour, it's quite rough, it's quite chunky, it's very mature compost made in our system that I will show you later on. So it's got a lot of chunks of wood, and it was really good over the summer because it's more reflective and more absorbent of water, and it stays wet, nice and well. The only thing is you might need to add an extra nitrogen source because it's very woody and it can subtract a little bit of nitrogen as it decomposes. And so we've added a little bit of organically certified pelleted chicken manure, and that's helped getting plants established with the wood decomposing at the same time. Now this type of mulch, you can see it very well here, can cause slug problems, so again you have to be on top of things. If you do this over the winter, it normally is a better idea to use and apply thick mulch, never mix it in with the soil, but just apply this type of woody stuff at the top. I would never use wood chip, raw wood chip on this, so this is compost really, but it's compost that hasn't gone down to, you know, like this consistency yet. There is bits that are more woody in there, and so I wouldn't necessarily I would definitely not mix it with the soil. I would definitely try and keep it away from the roots of the plants. If it does get close to the root zone, mix it with some nitrogen rich material like manure of any sorts, if you are sure that it's not contaminated with anything and it's organically produced. And then stay on top of your slugs, because initially with all those wood bits there might be a bit more pressure from slugs. So over here we've got winter radishes. These are watermelon radishes. These are summer radishes, salad radishes. I'm going to remove them because unfortunately all the ones that we haven't harvested already, so the ones that you see essentially, perhaps there's a third of these that we can still harvest, but the others have been damaged by slugs. Don't be fooled though, we've harvested at least 2/3 of what was initially in there, so it was a very dense planting of radish. Asian greens, this is the latest succession. Struggled a bit with drought because it rained a lot, but then when I planted these it didn't rain any, for a bit after that. So here there's more Asian greens. This is an empty bed that I'm going to plant today with something, I guess lettuce. Fennel that we're letting flower to attract insects. Unfortunately we didn't manage to sell all of our fennels. We sold 3 beds, but we planted way too much, and fennel is a novelty crop, so not many people in the UK know how to cook it, and it doesn't sell as well. You can use the fronds to make pesto, and you can use the flowers in many ways, but we're going to leave them on there to attract beneficial insects over the winter and allow birds to come into the garden more often. and they love seed heads like those because they're open, and when the seeds dry they're rich of food in the winter for them. And here we've got more chard and beetroot. Under the net there's some lovely carrots maturing. This is an interplanting that went really well, even though we have to wait until we harvest the leeks. Really, there are beetroots in there, and these beetroots have done amazingly well. I wasn't expecting them to grow this big. Actually, the whole point was to slow things down by planting them so densely, leeks and beetroots together. But the beetroots have really grown so fast. The leeks have been slowed down a bit, but the beetroots have gone monstrously well. Look at these guys in here. Anyway, so an interplanting that was successful, but we have to wait to be able to judge it completely. Here, red cabbages. This is a later succession. This side of the garden is the newest one, as I said earlier, so things are not as healthy and there are a few more weeds as well because the ground doesn't drain as well, but there are some lovely cabbages here. You'll see on the other side over there's a lot of much healthier cabbages in there. This is another interplanting that I love how it's been performing, and it's again beetroots that went really well. Beetroots grow really well in our soil. You can't see it's a bit dark in there, but they've done really well. You can see by the healthy leaves showing. And on the sides we have some cabbages, and these are summer cabbages, so pardon the weeds. We're going to get in here and weed actually in a couple of days because we've got an event on Sunday to do with seed gathering. But you can see the cabbages much slower because of the presence of the beetroots next to them, but that's fine because these cabbages are usually a little bit too fast. Whereas these cabbages that you see on the right are Savoy cabbages, so these are for winter, and we'll aim to harvest them before Christmas, just because we're going to be not here in the spring. But in your case, if you have them in your garden, you can harvest them until the following year, usually about March when they want to go to flower. The Savoy cabbages are a good one to leave in the field and harvest as you need them because they're very frost resistant, very hardy. And so here you see these are summer cabbages over there, pointed ones, and these are Savoy cabbages, and those are red cabbages. So you see the winter autumn varieties of cabbages versus the spring summer ones. All right, so in here we have some watermelon radishes. These are some beautiful radishes you can see in last year's tours. I might try and get in there. I'm not actually going to try and get in there. These are interplanted with cabbages. Sorry, it's not that I'm lazy, it's just that they're not big enough, so I wouldn't be able to show you much. This is baby kale. Well, we call it baby kale, it's gone now quite big, but it's a type of kale that we put in salads and stir fry mixes, and it comes in two colours, this red rubble one and this red Russian one. It's an amazing crop, very tender. You can eat it raw, you can eat it cooked, you can eat it steamed, you can add it to salads, you can add it to stir fries, you can do whatever you want with it. You can use it like normal kale. You won't be disappointed. You just need to cover it because of sweet midge, which is a pest that can cause havoc in young brassicas, and especially red Russian kale and soft kales. These are mulid radishes, so they're long root white radishes that are used to till the soil naturally without actually using any human intervention, because they go very deep and then they rot in the ground and so add carbon to it and break the clay pan. Over here we have some salad radishes. There haven't been too many slugs on this side of the garden. Even the Cavallonero has been attacked quite badly. Alright, so before we move on to the other side of the garden, just a quick look at this willow windbreak, which is doing a good job. Actually now it's producing a lot of shade, so this bed here is going to struggle. So these are beetroots and we want them a bit slower. Look at that bed. And we want them a bit slower so we don't mind them feeling the competition of the willows. If we didn't want that, we would prune them very heavily so that also the roots wouldn't compete with the roots of these beds, of the plants in these beds. Because we're more interested in the windbreak effect of the winter, we let these get bigger and higher and taller, and therefore they actually compete with these two beds. So we have to make sure that we keep an eye on the growth here, and ideally both of these should have been quite mature by now so that we could leave them in the ground and they wouldn't have to compete too much. We could just harvest them as we needed. But now we're going to plant something in here, actually some radishes. Those are quick, so they shouldn't mind the competition. Right, let's move on. Right, so while I turn around, it's something that some of you who are near Exeter might be interested in. Obviously we run regular tours of the garden, in-person tours for up to 15 people at a time. I've been doing more and more of those recently. It's completely free, and it gets you out here to see and touch and ask your questions, to see and touch the vegetables, obviously not me, and ask questions. And that's something that we love doing, and people seem to be enjoying it. So if you're interested, do get in touch with us via the Telegram group or via our email or in the comment section of this video, and we'll organize more before we're gone, before the winter kicks in and we start preparing for our move in December and January. And so do let me know. I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll carry on with the garden now. So without having to cut the shot, I'm just going to move straight away onto these guys. They don't look like much. We've harvested a lot of broccoli from these, and what I mean is Calabrese heads, and now they're producing side shoots. I'm just going to see if I can spot some. You can see, for example, this one, this side shoot has come off from the main head, and we get a lot of small broccoli heads like that. This is Bellstar. A shout out to Tim at Teen Greens, who recommended this variety. Very good for these side shoots, so you get multiple crops after cutting these. And that's the only way we can grow broccoli, really, because broccoli takes so much time and space and fertility, and then produce very little if you think about it. Just one head, one big Calabrese head, which goes in a meal. And so, you know, I can't sell it for too much, and so I've essentially produced very little value in monetary terms, but also in nutritional terms, from a lot of space, from one bed. And so the only way we can grow broccoli is to either interplant them, like we've done here for the cabbages, for example, with something else, like parsnips or carrots, but even that is not particularly profitable, or else to have broccoli that produce multiple times, so they produce over a much longer season, like this side shoots that I showed you a moment ago. So, you know, even these, in this way, it's not particularly profitable, but at least it makes a bit more sense economically. Right, let's move on. So we've got over here some beautiful red curly kale. A little bit of aphid pressure at some point when it got really hot, but now it's doing all right. A little bit of powdery mildew as well. I mean, this crop's like balance between heat and also, you know, they love a lot of light, but they need a significant amount of moisture as well. They're dry climate crops actually, but they're not desert climate crops. So in this country they do well in the summer, and they do all right in the winter if it doesn't rain too much, or if you provide them with a lot of drainage. This is the latest succession of broccoli. It looks like it's been planted a lot more recently than it actually has. The reason is that it's been surrounded by huge plants, and so obviously the roots are competing with these guys on the side. But that's fine, because we'll have a very late succession of Calabrese broccoli, and hopefully they'll crop into the winter, even though we might not be here. So then there's purple sprouting broccoli. These have been incredibly early. This is Rudolph, supposed to crop November, December, but it's cropping now. I don't know. It's happened last year as well, so we had a lot more late flowering broccoli. This year we have mostly these ones, which is good, because we can harvest them until December, and then, you know, there won't be any broccoli in the ground for spring harvesting, when somebody else will be taking over this garden. By the way, if you're interested in the transition and anything about the way we're making sure that somebody else takes over a living soil garden, do let me know in the comments, and I'll do a video on that. I don't know if people are interested in that sort of thing, but I think for some of you it might be interested to know the nuances and the technicalities of that, or also because you're interested in knowing what's going on. So do let me know. Otherwise, if I don't get any feedback from you, I'm not going to do a video on that, because, you know, just it might be a bit boring for some of you. So this is mustards, and this is curly parsley, which has done really well. I mean, parsley is a funny crop because it needs a lot of water, but it doesn't like a lot of water from the top. So it needs a well-drained, non-compact soil which stays moist, but it also likes to have a lot of heat from the top. Now, curly parsley is a bit more adapted to wet conditions, but the flat leaf one, which is an Italian variety, is not. These are mustard leaves, a beautiful cross between, well, I don't know if it's really a cross, but it's a plant that's been developed from kale and mustard together, so it doesn't go to flower. Well, this has gone to flower, but it doesn't go to flower as readily as most mustards, and it also produces a lot of big leaves, and it's got this nice root which looks like a big radish at the bottom. So I find it very fascinating. It's really hot, but when you cook it, it goes quite mild. Green curly kale has done amazing this year, obviously because it's been very hot and it loves the heat, but it's also been irrigated by us, and so it's done well in terms of water as well, even though this part of the garden, if you remember from previous tours, has been terrible. We didn't manage to grow anything in the first year. The second year things were struggling, like literally barely surviving, and now you can see there's already abundance after very strategically planting green manures, adding some chicken manure and a lot of compost and broad forking to improve drainage, and now look at the crop that we're getting from this space. Cavallonero here, late succession. This is early succession of green curly kale, and you can see two things on this. I'd like to show you some issues, otherwise it always looks like we only talk about the good stuff. There's a bit of powdery mildew on the stem. There was a bit of powdery mildew on the leaves as well, kind of moldy, powdery white stuff. You can't see it now because these have been harvested, and so that's the solution. Obviously, powdery mildew is a dry mildew. It develops in very dry conditions, so it doesn't have to do with it being too wet, but it's helped by having more airflow. So, and exposing more of the stem does help. So harvesting the lower leaves or throwing them away if they're damaged allows the plants to recover, and obviously irrigating the bottom of the plant, making sure that the plants have got plenty of moisture, allows them to recover, and these plants are doing well in that sense. Now there's a lot of weeds in between these beds, so apologies about that. We're going to get in here this afternoon. These beds were neglected for a bit. I can't remember what was in here. I mean, there was a crop, but it was a crop that didn't need much management, so we rarely got in here until we harvested it. I can't remember if it was fennel or something like that. And essentially what happened is quite a few thistles managed to go to seed, and now they're germinating, but that's fine. You know, it's still a quarter of what it could be if this was dug soil. And this is the only, you know, the weeds you see are the only weeds in a year. I mean, obviously there was a little bit of weeding we did here and there while harvesting, but we never came in this path to do proper weeding for the purpose of doing weeding. So that, you know, that tells a lot. So here there are more kales. Here's some beetroots that were planted together with an early succession of pak choys. Most of them have been harvested now. There's a bit of bok choy. I mean, some people use those terms interchangeably, bok choy and pak choy. I call bok choy this stuff, which is a variety from king seeds with huge stalk and less surface of leaf, which is good because slugs love the leaves. But the most important part of the pak choy is really the stalk. So it's annoying when you end up with a leaf like that, which makes your pak choy difficult to sell, even though actually what people want is the stem, which is completely fine. And this type is a bok choy. Well, I call it bok choy. You can call it whatever you want. I don't know if I'm being correct there. So do correct me if you think I'm wrong. And that's what I call the normal pak choy, with huge stalks, white stalks, but also large leaves. And this is a giant joy choy, which doesn't bolt very good in this climate. All right, let's move on. I'm just going to replace the mic has been displaced. Right, here we are again with the microphone working. This is a bed of mustards. A lot of them are going to flower, and the bees are loving it. Some late forage for the bees, but also for parasitoid wasps that have been eating the butterfly caterpillars, the caterpillars of the white cabbage butterfly. You can see that there's no netting on these large brassicas, and there's zero damage. And I know a lot of you struggle with cabbage white, and sorry, I don't mean to to minimize this problem, but it's just I'm trying to emphasize how important it is to create predator habitat. You know, you can see hopefully some bees in here. So there's pollinator habitat by letting some brassicas go to flower, but also there is predator habitat. And do follow Tollest Organics, who is the Ian Tollest is the person I learned this from, but also Hilltown Organics in Oakhampton. If you follow them on Facebook, you'll see Martin and Sarah sharing a lot of information on this type of gardening and doing amazing stuff in general. But I've been sharing a lot myself during these video tours, showing you that if you have brassicas in flower year round, you can get a population of predatory parasitoid wasps that eat your caterpillars, and so you don't have to do anything about that. So the netting you see here is actually for flea beetle initially, but now it's not needed anymore, so it's come off. This is an amazing crop here that I wanted to show you. It's called choy sum. You can eat it. You can eat the flower, you can eat the flowering bud, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the stem. The whole thing is tender, soft, juicy, and amazingly tasty. So definitely worth considering to grow that one. It's like a Chinese broccoli, but it's nothing like broccoli. It's more like a tender stem type thing, but really, really juicy, really tasty and mild. Fennels here, kind of a intermediate succession between the autumn ones and the summer ones. Here we have some wild rocket, I think this is. Very densely planted. We'll see how it does. Hear the buzz? These bees are on the rocket that self-seeded itself there, and so we let it be. And these beds were peas and broad beans, sorry, and beetroots. And so this one is still the look at how lazy and slow we've been. I mean, the mice and the birds have loved this, but we haven't been able to remove this pea trellis, partly because I've been showing this type of succession planting in tours, and so it's a nice demonstration thing. Let's see if I can get higher luminosity there, higher brightness. But anyway, so peas and beetroots on the ground, and then this bed here had the trellis removed, and there are only beetroots now. And these beds too, there were 6 beds which were peas and beetroots, and now they've all been converted to something else. So over here you see, for example, actually I need to cover this from flea beetle. There's rocket. We might try it without cover and see how it does, because flea beetle by now should be fine, shouldn't be too abundant. And here we have some salad turnips, the white Tokyo Japanese ones, and here we've got some salad radish. We're going to go back to show you the other side. Over here, after the broccoli that I've already shown you, we've got some red cabbage, later succession, and then we have some leeks planted in clumps. They do really well. Lots of parsley. Some of the Italian one has flowered, but the curly one is doing really well this year. And there's some coriander in flower at the back. I'm going to show you something actually. I don't know if you know, but if you let your coriander go to flower, what happens after the flowers, which are loved by the bees by the way, you get these beautiful pods. And these pods are edible, really nice, if you get them when they're not too woody. So these are a bit too far gone. When they're really green like this, you can eat them raw, you can add them to salads, and they've got beautiful, sorry for the high note, a beautiful coriander taste and a nice texture as well. So worth considering. More leeks here. You can see they're different colors because these are different varieties. This is a Bulgarian leek, which is very early, very fast growing, and not so frost hardy, whereas these blue ones are different varieties, Philomene and Mézières, which is from real seeds, an ancient, well, an old French variety. And then there's our beloved Bandit, which is, unfortunately is a hybrid, but it grows really well into the spring. Now, we won't need it, but somebody else will harvest this. Chinese leaf and chard into planting here. I'm not sure. So the one on the right is just Chinese leaf, and the one on the left has got chard in the middle instead of a row of Chinese leaf. Chinese leaf has been a bit temperamental this year. A lot of rotten ones. We've been really pushing it. We've been planting things way too close, and some of them haven't liked that. So look at this guy. It's obviously starting to rot from the outside, but that's fine. We'll still harvest this, but it's going to be much smaller, so it's not so good to sell for fermentation like kimchi, but it's good to add to salads and to sell to direct customers. I love Chinese leaf. It's one of my favorite salad leaves. I'm not so keen on kimchi though. Over here you can see some cabbages. It's hard to stress how big these are. You know, this is my hand, and this is way too big, even with 2 hands. Yeah, with 2 hands I wouldn't be able to wrap it around my hands. So there are lots of smaller ones. The biggest ones have been harvested. Now the smaller ones have remained in this bed. Very densely planted again compared to normal cabbage spacings. Here the celery. I'm going to show you how we harvest celery. I love harvesting celery because you get a nice smell, but it also looks like you're getting into a forest. Let's see if the light, there you go. So we don't remove the whole plant, but as you can see there, we harvest the outer stalks until we get to the blanched ones. So we harvest a bit of the blanched, a bit of the unblanched ones. This is Victoria F1. I do remove and use myself, we use it ourselves in our household, the outer ones, because people think they're a bit more fibrous, even though in this variety they're not very stringy. And then we sell the best ones in the middle. And then at the end, actually what I might do is harvest the middle row of this bed, which is 3 rows, as whole plants, so I leave more space and airflow for the outer ones. Having such dense planting has, believe it or not, worked really well in such a dry summer. It's been a very dry summer. And you know, even though celery is renowned for needing a lot of water, they've done amazingly well. And again, this is kind of a misconception. It loves water, but it doesn't like water on its leaves. So it's a dry climate crop. It's grown in tunnels, believe it or not, even in Italy, in places where it's a lot drier. And the reason for that is it doesn't like having wet air, moist air, damp air. It likes having a lot of water from below, but that's a different story. In this country, usually water comes from above. And so, you know, the problem is that if it rains too much, that's not good. So that's another argument for having, you know, a soil that can absorb and contain and retain a lot of water, so that even if it doesn't rain a lot, which is good for some crops actually, which don't like water on their leaves, you still have a lot of water that can be coming from the root zone where it's been stored over the previous months. So here we've got something that didn't really work. It was supposed to be a Romanesco broccoli, or, you know, cavolo romanesco, cavolfiore romanesco, like cauliflower. It didn't really work. The seeds, I mean, the seeds we were given weren't good. I can't remember where we bought it from, but definitely not what we wanted. And we've been using it as broccoli, but even then, it doesn't produce as much as we would hope for. So anyway, wasted a couple of beds. One has already been replanted with these guys, so there was something else in here. And also this one, they were all Romanesco, so, you know, imagine 3 beds for months without any production. I mean, a lot of compost material, but that's not good enough, is it? So anyway, we're replacing them with something else. So do get your seeds from reputable suppliers. We bought a lot of seeds this year to experiment, stuff that we couldn't find anywhere else, from Premier Seeds. And yeah, the quality hasn't been that good. I mean, some stuff is good and very cheap, and some stuff is not. So always better to rely on very good companies like Real Seeds and Vital Seeds and a Seed Co-op, which will, you know, help you if you tell them that you've had a failure. They will refund you or help you with understanding what went wrong. And also they're family run, they're local, and I'm not going to give you a spiel about how society should go in that direction. Anyway, so here we got lettuce and fennel, same interplanting you saw earlier. Over here we got our beloved radicchios and chicories. So radicchios are starting to form heads now. Yeah, you can see. And then the head we harvest, we section, we cut in slices, and we add to salad bags. It doesn't sell very well on its own. People find it's too bitter, they don't know how to use it. This is a beautiful variety called 506 TT, bred in Italy, and makes nice tight heads with very good consistency, because usually radicchios can be a bit inconsistent. What you see behind you, that looks like a dandelion, it's a type of chicory called Catalogna or Puntarelle, really, really bitter. So you need to be able to cook it properly, which is, you know, you blanch it, you remove the boiling water, so you lose the bitterness a little bit, and then you put it on a pan with some olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and you kind of stir fry it, you saute it, so that you make it coat itself with the olive oil and the garlicky smell as well, the garlicky taste, and then you add some lemon juice and you put it in your plate, and it can be a lovely side dish for a meat dish if you eat meat, or if you like me, like it on its own, or with a bit of bread and butter, or bread and whatever, and that goes really well. And curly endive can be cooked exactly in the same way. You can make more sophisticated dishes, add a bit of sweetness to that with sultanas or pine nuts and stuff like that. You know, don't take cooking advice from me, I'm a terrible chef, but that's the way we normally cook these, and they're really tasty, and they're also very good for you. You know, bitter tasting vegetables, especially these guys, the chicories, are amazingly for you, full of antioxidants, full of compounds, plant secondary metabolites that allow your digestion to work well, that coat your gut with lovely stuff and microbes, and so fantastic to eat. So, you know, even though in the UK they're not very popular, they should be. A lot of pak choi under here. I'm not going to show you those. They look amazing though. Let's do it. Been tempting you, so I should perhaps indulge. So to say, they're looking really good, and there's loads of them. There's at least 120 in this bed. A bit of Chinese. This is Chinese leaf instead. We had a few empty spots. We covered with that. Mustard leaf under the netting. The netting is not needed anymore. It's just, it was there. I'm going to remove it when we need it somewhere else. There is some Mizuna from Vital Seeds, Beniushi, very beautiful type of Mizuna, a colourful stem, pink stem compared to white Mizuna. Also a little bit slower, I find, which is good, because Mizuna can be a bit too fast. And it gets too big and then it's not as good in salads. Some rocket, salad rocket. Hasn't gone to flower yet, so we get another cut or two. And behind it, this was direct seeded with a jang seeder. Some ruby streak mustard. And more pak choys. I could have shown you this without lifting the net earlier. Look at that. The lazy in me is losing a few tricks there. So yeah, this is the bok choy type, very densely planted. This is an experiment, 4 rows rather than 3, because they're usually, again, way too fast, and then we don't have a big market for pak choy. Again, people, please do appreciate pak choy. It's a great vegetable. I don't know why people don't buy it more. It's amazing. Don't be fixated on the leaf. You know, sometimes the leaves look a little bit like that because there's lag damage, but the stalks are amazingly tasty in a stir fry, even in a salad. If you marinate it a bit before adding it to the salad. Again, so here we got some lettuce, the usual planting, 4 rows rather than 3. We'll see if these varieties do a bit better because they're winter varieties, and so they don't mind being a bit more crowded than the other interplanting I showed you earlier. This is a carrot bed, a bit untidy, a bit weedy because we never, we go in there to harvest the carrots and usually we cover again for carrot fly, so it never gets weeded. And carrots kind of tend to lend themselves to having a bit of a weedier ground. But apart from that, they've been really good. We've had a huge crop of carrots this year, and we're still harvesting the last bed of the initial succession. Don't know if this carrot is going to be any good. Yes, decent, but we've had much longer ones. Really tasty, really sweet. You can see some mushrooms growing in here. This is going to be such a long video. Apologies for those of you who don't like long videos, but that's all you get. So French beans interplanted with carrots here. You can see carrots down the middle and the French beans on the side. They've been cropping all along. It's been a fantastic summer for French beans. And there are some radishes and spinach that self-seeded from the previous crop, and I wanted to show you. So these flowers are good food for parasitoid wasps, but the pods, after the flowers produced pods, are great food for humans. I'm not going to eat on camera or while doing the video, but these are really tasty, fully mild, so they're not hot like a radish, but they've got the same taste. So if you're into radish taste but not spiciness, that's something to consider. This is another interplanting of French beans, yellow, and they've been harvested, so there's much to there you go. Yellow Orinoco variety, amazing variety of French beans with some beetroots down the middle. And here we've got some from borlotti beans and runner beans. Lady Di is an amazing variety of runner beans without strings. It's usually got red flowers, so this is a white lady, a different variety of white lady, which unfortunately has quite a few strings, so not so impressed by that. So Lady Di, we've harvested most of these this week, so we'll have to let them recover and produce more. Our classic interplanting, I'm not going to spend much time on this because I talk all the time about it in other videos. So leeks and French beans, more fennel and lettuce. I think that's mostly it. We've got some chard with borlotti beans that are drying now on the plants. Most of them actually have been harvested fresh. And then we've got some Chinese leaf that, as I told you, it's kind of rotting in the ground now, so I need to harvest it and try and sell it to our fermenter friend who makes kimchi from it. The pink one I'm using in salads a lot. This looks really like phosphorescent pink, beautiful. A few cauliflowers again, a bit of sweet midge on those, so a lot of them aren't performing as well as they could. This is a bit of carrot, and I always recommend having some carrots without netting to test whether your system is becoming less prone to carrot fly. We had 0 damage on these, so perhaps we could have saved ourselves all the time and effort involved in the net. Let me show you from here. Oh gosh, it's really deep. There you go, beautiful carrot. I can't see much damage. I need to wash this to see whether there was any damage. It's a bit of damage from slugs or whatever, but this doesn't have carrot fly damage. It's a very long carrot in clay soil and no netting on it, so your system will become more resilient and more resistant to pests. And so here we've sown some radishes. Not much more to show you. I'm going to go in the tunnel and then we can stop. Oh, actually I might show you the compost as well. Comfrey here, lots of comfrey. We'll harvest before the winter for composting. And leeks, a few blueberries, a few volunteer tomatoes here, becoming a bit weedy. Our propagation area, what's going on in here? Alright, so we've got rocket, which sometimes we sow direct, sometimes we sow in trays, just in case we have too much slugs pressure. Pak choys, always from trays, slugs love it too much. spinach for the tunnel, more lettuce, which I'm going to transplant today. Forget the time. Well, I need to find the time. I think this is chard for the tunnel, and other things, other lettuces for the tunnel, and other things like salady leaves for the tunnel for the winter. More lettuces that will go outside today, more Asian greens, mustard leaves, spinach, flowers and nasturtiums there. And then we got herbs, chervil and dill, fennel, which has got to go out today, some more radishes, lots of stuff in here, coriander, mizunas, so still a lot of crops that can go in winter. Tomatoes, so let's talk about these guys just briefly. You see the leaves are mostly gone up to head height, so we want some good light. You see already how shaded this is because the sun is so low compared to the summer, to the early summer at least. So the leaves have been removed up to head height, and so that there's more light for the fruit and also for the rows which are on the northern side. And the cucumbers as well have been pruned very high, so most of the leaves are just at the very top. These have been coming up and then they went all the way down, so those are twice as long as the height of the tunnel, the cucumbers I mean. So tomatoes have been doing really well this year, a lot of production, and now they're slowing obviously down, and we haven't been on top of pruning them properly, so some of them are actually starting to collapse a little bit. We were really pleased with this variety of beef tomatoes, which are now almost finished, called Brandy Boy, and Marmande is the usual one, but Brandy Boy gave some huge tomatoes. Now these are very small actually compared to what we got initially at the start of the year, and you can see it in the previous videos anyway. They're still producing. I don't know how many of these will manage to ripen. The trick is obviously to pinch them off, to remove the tops with a clean cut, and then remove as many of the leaves as possible. And now this is, I think this one broke actually because there's no leaves at all. It's good to leave some leaves at the top to photosynthesize, but if the fruit initiates ripening, then it will ripen on its own if it's got sun. Aubergines, yeah, didn't do very well. I always think aubergines are not worth the effort. I never eat aubergines anyway. I only eat Sicilian aubergines when I'm in Sicily, and anything else tastes really awful in comparison. Sorry about that. I'm not usually a vegetable snob. I eat anything, but aubergines are something I barely like when they're really good. So anyway, you know, if you ever go to Sicily and eat some proper aubergines, which don't have this shape, they're actually round and they've got very purpley, light coloured hue to them. They taste amazing. There's no comparison with these guys. Even when you eat these types, the long pear-shaped black aubergines in Italy or in Spain, they're just too bitter. They don't taste of anything, even though you do all the salting and all the squeezing and all the rinsing, which I imagine most of you don't even do. You know, if you get into aubergines and you really like them when you eat them in the Mediterranean, it's difficult. You have to find the right varieties, grow them really well, perhaps from grafted plants that you buy in, and then you need to cook them properly, which means, you know, salt them when they're raw and then wash out the salt and rinse out and squeeze them so you get the black liquid out so the bitterness goes away. Sorry. And then you can fry them or cook them the way you like it. Again, don't take advice from me, but I'm just suggesting a few things that will make aubergines a lot more pleasant for those of you like me who, like me, are not big fans. So here cucumbers have done really well. Essentially there's a little bit of downy mildew there. I'm going to remove most of the leaves anyway because they're shading out all the rest. So this is it. There's some ginger there. I know some of you must have noticed that and said, why didn't you talk about that? Ginger, and there's a lot of basil in here, now doing really well as the temperatures have gone kind of in its favourite range in the tunnel. And this is it. So let's talk about compost and then squash, and then we'll finish there. So compost, I am hugely grateful for an amazing volunteer, David, who does a lot of work on compost turning and compost making. He's a very young a guy who volunteers for us and very passionate about compost and composting, and so he will make like a bottom layer. I mean, I obviously give him advice, and in time he's learning more and more, and then he's become more independent, and he can actually make beautiful compost almost on his own just by asking a few bits of advice here and there about how to treat ingredients. And essentially we put always a layer of wood chip at the bottom, and then we start piling up waste on our own, in our own time, very randomly. We're not paying too much attention to what we put in. We had a bit of brown, like sawdust, coffee chaff. Coffee chaff is actually not really a brown, but anything brown, shredded paper, cardboard, stuff like that. Every now and then, normally though, if you had a lot of stemmy materials, those are actually full of carbon anyway. So the dry stuff that you put in is not so much to add extra carbon, but more to add some dry stuff to deal with moisture. Obviously, you know, this is very quick. I'm not claiming that these 2 minutes are gonna make you great composters. There's more videos on composting out there on YouTube. Also in our previous video tools, I talk about it more extensively. So he essentially, what David does is he turns all the stuff that was in there, which was really green. I mean, the top of it was fully green like that. And he turned it in here. So now the bottom is what you see at the top, and the top is going at the bottom. And when he does that, he also mixes things up. He chops them up a bit with a mattock, you know, and he manages in you know, a little bit less than a full day to do the turning of a huge pile. This was way higher than where that is when it was on this side. Then it was turned in here and it went down at least kind of 80 centimeters, and now it's already going down very fast every day, and the temperature is rising. It will peak probably at 80 degrees. I don't know if you can see that, still going up. It's at 55 degrees at the moment, and so it will go really hot. It will decompose and go down in volume by at least 2/3, so it will become a third of its original volume, and that's it. Then when we need to do that, when David turns this into there, or I turn that into there, then we need to make space over here. So we need to turn whatever was in here into here, and this is usually more mature because it's already been composting and went hot at least once. So you can see this material is already usable. You can sieve it if you want it a bit better. It's quite moist in the middle and dry on the outside. There's a lot of worms and insects in there, and so this is compost that you could potentially already start to use, but we'll leave it 2 months usually in there, after having spent 2 months in there and 2 months in there. So in 6 months you get some beautiful finished compost. Finally, let me show you some squash. It's not time to harvest them all yet. Some of them are still ripening, and I'm not going to spend too much time telling you how to know whether they're ripe or not. There's a good video by our friend Charles Downing on the internet, but also on Telegram. I go in a lot of detail with short videos about these. It's more short tips. So essentially these are not ready yet, and you can tell it by this part of the plant. But this is Utah Indian, a very good tasting one. Allegedly, we haven't tried it yet. That's called kabocha, the black one, kind of dark green one. And then the orange ones, oops, got stuck there. The orange ones is uchiki kuri. This bed was full of sweet corn, which gave amazing cobs this year. Beautiful stuff. And now the rats have found them. The rats live at the back of this bed actually, and they've eaten the ones that we didn't harvest. But we harvested them all. I mean, we harvested all the good ones, and we left in only the ones that were damaged or, you know, too small. And so, you know, when I said rats live at the back of the, I mean, there's a lot of mulch there on that side, and Roger keeps finding young rats in there. Well, they're fine. They don't damage the garden. They don't get involved in our storing or packing areas, so I don't mind them living in there. Now, over winter, we might need to bring dogs in to kill a few, but that might not be the case. Only if they start eating the tomatoes or the beetroots and the carrots. So some autumn fruiting raspberries, and I'm going to turn the camera around and say goodbye. Here we go, and the tour is finished. I'm going to say goodbye now, and I'll see you in the next video, which will be very probably a tour of the garden in the month of October. Do let me know if you've got any questions that you'd like to see answered, or if there's any type of video that you'd rather watch. As I've said in the past, these English videos get a lot less views, so I'm going to keep documenting everything in English. But it'd be nice to have more feedback and knowing what you guys would love to see, and if we can manage to grow the English speaking side of the channel, or if you think there should be a channel which is completely in English, any advice. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one, and I hope your vegetable gardens will look as full, if not more full than ours now. What we're gonna try and do this year, and it's been working a lot better than in previous years, is keeping the ground covered over winter. Every single bed will be covered with plants, and hopefully 80% will be productive plants that we harvest at least until Christmas, and the rest will be green manures. So I hope your gardens will be as full and as wildlife rich as this, if not more, going into the winter. And having said that, see you later.